Anyway, do I get a question, Amy?
Again,
Christopher Hitchens.
Again, I worry about the plain meaning of words. I believe I said earlier that I held a different view at the time and have since changed it. My articles and statements against the war and my reports from Iraq and its neighbors at the time are all available in a book published by Verso. It's called, this one is called For the Sake of Argument. And I haven't repudiated them. It's that I no longer hold to them. I was unpersuaded in the following manner. I was unpersuaded
I
in the
don't have the
following manner.
education to work that one out.
I was unpersuaded in the following manner. I ended the war. I ended the war in northern Iraq, where I saw what the real consequences of Saddam Hussein's rule had been. I knew something about it, there's no question, but I wasn't prepared to be told by so many people that in their view, the American intervention had saved their lives and the lives of their families. And I hadn't got a clever anti-war argument to make to that point, and I began a process of re-examination of which I can't really say, or be expected to say, that I'm ashamed. You're right, I had some fun at the expense of Charlton Heston. I mean, I can remember it too. When I asked him what the neighboring countries were, he said Bahrain, which is of course an island. And it was all good sport, and I'm not ashamed of any of that either, but there comes a point when you've got to be a little more serious. Now, the fact is, there was no invasion by George Bush of Iraq, nor was there any UN mandate to do so. I'm talking about 1991. It wasn't an invasion of Iraq. It was an expulsion of Iraq from Kuwait by a coalition which included even Syria. Now, if Mr. Assad can change his mind on this, and I can, and many other people too, I suppose we have to congratulate you on being absolutely 100% consistent in your support for unmentionable thugs and criminals.
What about the issue of a timetable withdrawing from Iraq, or withdrawing immediately, or not withdrawing? Let me first put the question to George Galloway. What do you think needs to happen today?
Well, Mr. Hitchens says that you have no intention of an Iraq Americana. Well, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, the chances are it probably is a duck. And down on the ground in Iraq, it doesn't look much like the United States is planning to leave of their own volition. After all, they're building massive and what they hope to be permanent military bases to station their forces there. They have engineered a puppet regime which they intend to allow to be a kind of lipstick on the ugly face of their occupation, which will allow their corporate friends, do I really need to mention them? Do I need to name them? Do I really need to? I mean, they've probably got supporters in the hall.
Might as well.
Christopher's new best friends, Bechtel and Halliburton, and all these robber barons, these vulture capitalists who are cutting Iraq like a shawarma, stealing the American people's money, stealing the Iraqi people's money. You think they're planning on going home anytime soon of their own volition? Think Halliburton intends to leave? Do you think their plans to force the privatization of all of Iraq's industries and services are because they intend to allow Iraq to be free? Do you think they're forcing of Iraqi farmers to buy patented seeds so that they'll be forever in debt to the agribusiness companies of the United States is because they intend to allow Iraq to be free? They intend, if they can, to have an Iraq Americana. But the Iraqis have decided otherwise. And that's what you can't stand. That's what you can't stand. You see, you slander the Iraqi resistance as being foreign fighters. I have to laugh at this term, foreign fighters. Yeah? Which part of Iraq is General Myers from? Which part of Iraq are the British and American generals from? The most foreign fighters in Iraq are wearing British and American uniforms in Iraq.
No.
But the idea that the Iraqi resistance are foreigners or Islamist fundamentalists is denied now even by the testimony of the United States generals themselves. Hitchens is clinging to an argument which has even been abandoned by the United States generals themselves. Only 6%, according to the United States government, of prisoners taken from amongst the Iraqi resistance have been foreigners, if Arabs from neighboring Arab countries can be called foreigners by a government in the United States of America. That means that 94% of them are Iraqis. Now you should know better. You see, we were told in Vietnam that if only the Red Chinese and the Soviet Union would stop meddling in Vietnam, there would be no Vietnamese resistance. They couldn't bear to concede that the Vietnamese people were prepared to fight them with their teeth, if necessary, to rid their country of foreign domination. They've told us in every single anti-colonial struggle that it was foreign interference. It was the Reds, or it's the Islamists from outside. If only we could extirpate them. Kerpow, the man in a turban with a beard in the Tora Bora, or his lieutenant, the Zarqawi, who it turns out actually fell out with bin Laden a very long time ago, according to the excellent rebuttal of Mr. Hitchens' 10 points by Professor Juan Cole of Michigan University, available on the internet.
Yes.
To anyone who wants to read. A man even more cerebral than Christopher Hitchens. This slander of the Iraqi resistance is self-deluding. You're fooling yourselves if you believe it. Because if you believe it, you must believe that if only you could seal the borders a bit more, if only you could get rid of the foreign fighters, then everything would be rosy, everything would be hunky-dory. This is a level of self-delusion which borders, frankly, on the racist. The vast majority of the people of Iraq are against the American and British occupation of their country. Your own friend, Coburn, writing from Iraq recently, said so. The vast majority of Iraqis want this occupation to end.
George.
And the vast majority of those fighting to bring it to an end are Iraqis. Get used to it, get over it, understand it, or you're fooling yourselves.
Well.
George Galloway, with one word, do you think the U.S. and British forces should be withdrawn immediately?
Not only do I.
Only a word. Only a word.
You want one more?
Yes or no?
Oh, yes.
Okay, Christopher Hitchens, when do you think the U.S. troops should leave Iraq?
I think I can be as precise, though perhaps not as terse, as Mr. Galloway on this point. And I should thank him, by the way, for eliciting, or allowing me to elicit, or you, perhaps, ladies and gentlemen, to elicit from him what I feared, but didn't hope, but in other words, a full declaration of support for the campaign of sabotage and murder and beheading that has taken the lives of brave journalists, demolished the offices of the United Nations, demolished the offices of the United Nations and the Red Cross.
Are there any depths to which you will not sink?
Shot down senior clerics outside their places of worship, and continues as a campaign of mayhem to this day.
Are there no depths to which you will not sink? You've fallen out of the gutter into the sewer.
You might all care to remember.
You've fallen out of the gutter into the sewer.
You might all care to remember that you are being televised, ladies and gentlemen. I trust your mothers are not watching. You're shouting at me down, so I can answer the question. You're unclear on the concept. I will proceed if I'm allowed to, but I'm just reminding you, you're on telly, okay? Just hope your friends and relatives aren't watching. Now, a campaign of mayhem and sabotage that was most obviously directed, and here's where I want to move to my point, in February last, against the only attempt that Iraq has ever seen to hold a national election to provide a parliament, a constitution, and an elected government. Now, what are the odds, do you think, that those who are blowing up the offices of the UN and who recently shot down a senior Sunni cleric in Baghdad because he too wants an end to the occupation, but he asked his congregation to vote in the upcoming elections, what are the odds that these people represent the secret silent majority in Iraq, as, say, the FLN did in Algeria? Well, let's just do some simple, relatively simple arithmetic. In the 3 Kurdish provinces of Iraq, there is really not a single sympathizer either of the Ba'ath Party or of Al-Qaeda. It can be taken as a certainty that we know at least 20% of the population consider this resistance to be a fascist pest and have committed their heroic armed forces, because there is a rebel army in Iraq. There is a people's army, there is a guerrilla force in Iraq. It's called the Peshmerga. It's the People's Liberation Army of Kurdistan. And it fights on our side. And we at last, because Mr. Galloway is right that our policy in the past has been heinous, we at last fight on their side too. Excellent. Now, very well, moving right along. It is admitted, I don't think it's even denied by the egregious figure of Professor Cole, who's never set foot in the region, though claims to speak Farsi and various other languages. I don't believe it's denied even by him, and he changes his mind on these things about once a week, that Ayatollah Sistani, Grand Ayatollah Sistani, is considered by the majority of the Iraqi Shia to be, let's say, at least their spiritual leader. If it had been up to Grand Ayatollah Sistani, and if you like, if it had been up to my advice too, Mr. Paul Bremer would have had to call elections much earlier than he did, and so he should have done, and make a transfer of sovereignty much sooner than he did, and so he should have done. But we have no reason to doubt that the forces that favor this transition to a federal democratic system in Iraq, where no one group rules by violence or terror or by dictatorship, where there is federal and local autonomy, and where disputes are not settled by violence, is favored by the latent majority of the Iraqi people. Because if it's not so, it's very easy for them to participate in the vote. And what they do instead is they try and sabotage it. I think that's a very eloquent campaign that's being run by Mr. Galloway's heroic resistance now, to stop these elections from happening. To speak to the people, the terrified people who've been through 3.5 decades of war and fascism and terror, and never give them a moment to breathe, never give them a moment's freedom from fear and intimidation. Shame on the people. Shame on the people who call this a liberation movement.
Christopher Hitchens, what about the costs of this war at home? I've just come from New Orleans. Across the political spectrum, you're hearing more and more dissent and criticism of what's happening in Iraq because of what didn't happen in New Orleans, the lack of National Guard in Mississippi and Louisiana, the weapons, rather the vehicles that were needed that weren't there. So 2 questions on that. What about the cost here at home with the Hurricane Katrina and the lack of response? And if we see clearly, because the reporters are unembedded here, the troops weren't in New Orleans and they really presented the pictures, if we see clearly the way the U.S. responded here in terms of rebuilding or not, what makes you think the U.S. is any better in Iraq?
Well, I would caution people from adopting a zero-sum mentality in this respect. I had the opportunity to speak with a close associate of Lieutenant General Steve Blum some time ago, who said that he had, before the situation became as dire as it did, had been able to call up the Secretary of Defense and say, I have 200,000 troops, you can have any time. But the question is, where's the order going to come from? The President can't, as you know, Amy, cannot order American troops into action in a State of the Union. He has to be asked by the governor for this to happen. And the governor has to admit, well, I'm sorry, it's in the Constitution, I'm sorry, it's in the time ago, said that he had, before the situation became as dire as it did, had been able to call up the Secretary of Defense and say, I have 200,000 troops, you can have any time. But the question is, where's the order going to come from? The President can't, as you know, Amy, cannot order American troops into action in a State of the Union. He has to be asked by the governor for this to happen. And the governor has to admit, well, I'm sorry, it's in the Constitution. It is in the Constitution. Unless you
troops
want
into Iraq.
Unless you want to invoke the Insurrection Act, which hasn't been, I think, invoked until, since the Civil War. So the fact of the matter is there were more than enough soldiers. They just weren't given the orders in time, and that's a matter of future. But as soon as they made their appearance, didn't everything start to look a lot better? Aren't you proud of General Honoré? Are you not proud that a man born into segregation and discrimination is leading really hard, professional, tough, generous, brave men and women in uniform for the recovery of New Orleans, and all the time has a son in Fallujah, and seems to think he can manage both? I think it's hugely to the credit of the United States Armed Forces that they would consider it ignoble to abandon their commitments in Sada City and in Halabja and elsewhere. Ignoble and parochial and provincial. Now, Mr. Galloway came a little near the knuckle a moment ago and decided to overlook it. He said what I said was bordering on racist. I really feel I'm entitled to ask him to withdraw that imputation. I think that's an appropriate thing to say, but I will have to add that for people to start pumping out propaganda before the bodies had even been uncovered in New Orleans, saying, and to make points, demagogic often, saying they wouldn't be dead if they weren't black, about people who haven't been identified yet, whose parents don't know where they are. And to say this wouldn't have happened if we weren't wasting money on Arabs, that is an appeal to the most base provincial, isolationist and chauvinist mentality. You're on TV.
Galloway.
You're all on TV.
I'm so glad Mr. Hitchens gave that answer. You see, this is where it ends, isn't it? You start off being the liberal mouthpiece of one of the most reactionary governments this country has ever seen on the subject of war. You say you've got your own liberal reasons for doing so, and you end up an apologist and a mouthpiece for those miserable, malevolent incompetents who couldn't even pick up the bodies of their own citizens in New Orleans in the aftermath of a hurricane. That's where it ends. Hitchens, that's where it ends. You end up a mouthpiece and an apologist for the Bush family, whose matriarch. You want to talk about racism? What about Barbara Bush? What about Barbara Bush, who took a look at the poor, huddled masses in the Astrodome and told us they'd never had it so good, who told us they were better off than they'd ever been? Underprivileged people now in an Astrodome, the only problem with whom, she said, was that so many of them wanted to stay in Texas. You know, Hitchens, you're a court jester. You're a court jester. Not at Camelot, like other ridiculous former liberals before you, but at the court of the Bourbon Bushes. Barbara Bush, the Marie Antoinette of modern day American politics.
Well, I think I have to say a quick word, Amy, if I may. I mean, this is all good knockabout stuff, but I must say Mrs. Bush Senior does remind me of, I think it was Lady Diana Cooper, who was once stopped outside Claridge's Hotel in London as she was waiting under the umbrella for the Daimler to be brought round after a ball. Ragged man approached her and said, "Ma'am," he said, "I haven't eaten for 3 days." She said, "Well, you're very foolish then. You must try. If necessary, you must force yourself, if necessary." It's called a tumbril remark in some circles. Yes, I don't know where the Marie Antoinette cake shop was in the Astrodome, but if you notice, I didn't say that I defended the President's record on this, and I've written very critically about it already for all of you to read in Slate magazine. What I will not have said is that we should go to a refugee woman in Biloxi and say to her, "Do you realize the Arabs have stolen the money that should have come to you?" And we have no right to put the poor against each other in that way and to betray our internationalism, and we have no right whatever to insult the tremendous performance of the United States Armed Forces once they were put into action. And I will add one more thing. The 82nd Airborne and the 1st Air Cavalry, so far from being distracted by Iraq, have learned in Iraq matters of civil reconstruction, water distribution, purification, culture, that have been extremely useful to them in New Orleans. I would advise you not to jeer these men and women while you're being televised, ladies and gentlemen. I would advise you not to do it. The shame is yours, I'm awfully sorry. I meant to have said that before, in any case. Yes, and we will bring Sada City back too, and we will rebuild Halabja. Yes, we will. And not only that, the Army Corps of Engineers has just finished building a new extension of the Kabul to Kandahar highway in Afghanistan. That's what the Army Corps of Engineers are doing, which means that the journeys between several major cities in Afghanistan, which used to take days over rocky and dangerous roads, are now much easier, and a triumph of humanism has occurred. If I was a less patient person, I would get the impression that someone was trying to shut me up here. Don't even think about it. What I say doesn't require your endorsement and isn't drowned by your zoo noises, because I'm on C-SPAN now, and all they can hear is you baying. They can make me out all right, so just give it up, okay? Simmer down. Or let me put it like this, it takes a bit more than that. It takes a bit more than that, tough guys and gals, to shut me up as well. Now, the word warlord is quite often used when we discuss Afghanistan, which is a country we haven't talked about enough, whereas I say the Taliban would still be in power if the anti-war movement's advice had been heeded. What is a warlord? A warlord is someone who can control a piece of road by force, who can, with a few brigands, roll a rock into that road and say, "You don't pass without paying tribute to me." Warlordism is one of the seedbeds of the swamp that Mr. Galloway describes that breeds terrorism. If you can build solid, wide roads that directly connect the cities, you abolish brigandage and warlordry. Are you in favor of abandoning Afghanistan to warlordage and brigandry again and see what happens? I do. I heard a few yeses. I thought I might.
You already have.
Anything's better than imperialism,
Exactly
right?
what's happened.
Well, consider carefully what you may be demanding. I think it is a most excellent use of our Army Corps of Engineers to help liberate Afghanistan and its neighbors from that kind of tyranny. I also think, perhaps it would be ignoble to add this, it is not without a dimension that involves our own self-interest, because we do indeed know the swamp from which the enemy first came, and this is what it means to drain it. That and swatting the mosquitoes, I'll have to add. Killing them, in other words, poisoning them, putting them down. Knowing an enemy when we see one, treating an enemy like an enemy, recognizing that we have a deadly foe, not surrendering at the invitation of a courtier of sadists. I'm not a member of the Bush entourage. I've never appeared on a public platform with a dictator. I never have, and I never will. I couldn't face you if I had that on my record. It must be some sordid kind of displaced guilt that makes Mr. Galloway want to throw out accusations like this. I've never done that. And to come fresh from embracing these blood-stained bastards and to say to you, it's your fault that these people hate you, is more than we should be expected to take.
Well, before you each give your closing 5 minutes, I wanted to ask each of you, Christopher Hitchens, and then I'll ask you a question about the media, George Galloway. But Christopher Hitchens, as you've changed your views over time, do you feel that the media is friendlier to you?
I'm just trying to think. No, I was a columnist for, say, Vanity Fair, which is, I think, where most of my readers follow my stuff, before I resigned from The Nation, for example, and I didn't, as it were, get that job by quitting The Nation. I have a feeling I know the imputation of what you're saying, but I think I probably wouldn't be the best judge in my own cause. I can see the editor of The Nation magazine sitting in the front row. I feel fairly confident that if you asked him, he would not say that I left the Nation in order to improve my salary prospects. But, and I frankly think that's a bit of a waste of a question. But if... Plainly, if the impression I give is of someone who is as mercenary and actually bad at handling money as that, it's an impression I wouldn't be able to correct by denying it.
That was a bit of a waste of an answer. Well, I don't know about you, Amy, but I'm beginning to think this debate is running out of steam a little.
Yes, I have the same impression.
If Mr. Hitchens agrees, it might be that we should begin to think about winding it up without further ado. I see some of the audience are leaving. The hour is late, and I think we've generated about as much light as we're going to, and as much heat as we ought to. Well, because Mr. Hitchens is right. I'm certainly no pacifist, and neither is he. And we probably oughtn't to get any more belligerent towards each other than we have been.
Don't worry about that
already.
Well, why don't you give each of you?
If I still have the mic, I would just like to say that this issue of whether the Iraq war was necessary and just or not is one which is already being adjudicated upon by the people who are watching C-SPAN, by the people who read these proceedings this evening, in their opinion polls, in their comments of all kinds. There are very, very few friends left of the argument that Mr. Hitchens has put. Of course, on the far shores of the crazed right-wing neocon circles in the United States, he's a new hero. But amongst the mainstream majority and amongst those with whom Mr. Hitchens used to travel, this subject is already adjudged. You see, the Elysian fields that he seeks to conjure up in his depiction of Iraq today simply don't bear any resemblance to the situation we all see on our television screens and read about in our newspapers every day. The situation's not getting better in Iraq. It's getting worse. Religious fundamentalism, to which he is so opposed, has been put in power in Iraq by the invasion of Bush and Blair. The Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, of whom Mr. Hitchens now, it's very bizarre, a Trotskyist friend of the Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, that he speaks so approvingly of now, is the ruling power in Iraq, and believe me, he is an Islamic fundamentalist. Believe me, he wants to ensure that the people who live under his purview follow every dot and comma of the Islamic fundamentalist agenda. And I warn you to be careful of what you wish for. Because if either the United States or its friend Israel attacks Iran in the next period over the issue of nuclear power, Iran will answer in Iraq. And they will answer, above all, in the south of Iraq, where the Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani is top dog, thanks to your friends Bush and Blair. Extremism has not been dampened down by this war. It has been fantastically enhanced. The number of people who hate us in the world has not been reduced, but has been greatly enlarged. The confidence of people in their own governments and their own political systems in the belligerent countries has not been enhanced. It has been substantially undermined. The ability of the international legal and political system to operate as a means of resolving disputes has not been enhanced by this affair, but has been fatally undermined by it. This is a disaster, this war on Iraq. When the French statesman Talleyrand was told by an aide of the murder of a political opponent, the aide said, "It's a terrible crime, sir." And Talleyrand answered, "It's worse than a crime, it's a blunder." This attack on Iraq and its subsequent occupation is a crime, yes, but it's worse than a crime. It's a blunder. It's a blunder that's made us all more insecure. It's a blunder which has destabilized the world, multiplied our enemies. It has few friends left, and you will regard yourselves as having been privileged in years to come that you were able to witness the ridiculous spectacle of this popinjay who continues to support it.
Christopher Hitchens, the final 5 minutes.
Well, I do share Mr. Galloway's feeling that our debate or our exchange may have passed the point of being pointful. I can't object to being called a popinjay, since the principal definition is that of a target for archery and shot, which I dare say I've brought upon myself and certainly feel I've well earned in Mr. Galloway's case. I'll just have to say, since even from the chair there was a question, as it were, about my motive in this, that I think I can describe it fairly simply. And it was rather fairly put, in fact, by my great antagonist, Harold Meyerson, the editor of the American Prospect, in a recent article. He said Mr. Hitchens' motivation for being involved in this appears to be his old friendship and solidarity with the secular Iraqi Kurdish left forces. I thought, well, that's nice, because just for once someone has got right how it was that I made some new friends. Didn't lose the old ones unless they wanted to desert me. But I will tell you that some of the admirers on the MoveOn.org world that I may have lost are well worth it in exchange for the comrades I have made. And once Mr. Galloway may have enough in his memory as a socialist, the name that he's begun to disgrace so gravely, so horribly, to remember that if you take a position of solidarity with your comrades, you take it win or lose, up or down. You don't say, well, I'm sorry, comrades, brothers and sisters, I'm going to have to desert you now, because they might say, well, why is that? And I might have to tell them, well, because Michael Moore says so, or because Cindy says so, or because someone's offered me some oil for food money to do so, and I'm not going to do it. You would have more to be proud of, ladies and gentlemen, if you could, after tonight, point to something that you had done to help build up the new Iraq. Point to something that you were doing to help the Iraqi women's organizations, who indeed do have to combat fundamentalism. Point to something you had done to help unearth the mass graves and console the relatives of those who were found in them. Point to something you had yourselves contributed to the emancipation of Kurdistan. You could, or something perhaps to help the new Iraqi press and media acquire some more modern equipment on which to conduct this debate. Why don't you think of the possible nobility of that alternative? Because to offer your solidarity instead to the 154 operations that are sabotaging this new process is to be, I think, hopelessly covered in shame and something that you'll look back on with real regret. So it's not too late. There are many, many, many outlets for your compassion, your energy, your internationalism. Many Iraqis are crying out for your help. Don't appear, do not appear to be deaf on a point as important as this. And with that, that's the end of my pro bono bit. From now on, if you want to talk to me, you need a receipt, and I'll be sitting selling books, because this is, after all, America. Thank you so much for coming.